The Penis Monologues, Rare Letter Number 8. Dear Mentorship, yesterday they called it graduation day. There were smiles, congratulations. A bell was rung, an IV came out, a PICC line was dressed for the last time. A port that had become part of the body's familiar medical architecture was finally scheduled for removal. A final infusion finished dripping into a vein that had learned, against its will, to receive toxin medicine with an origin story in World War I. That inhumane mustard gas. What a parent to have. But I digress. Everyone seemed happy at each graduation I saw, and they should have been. Treatment had ended. A milestone had been reached. A chapter had closed. But I suspect many of us carried home a feeling we could not quite explain. While everyone else was celebrating what we were leaving behind, we grads were quietly wondering what came next. The bell itself can mean many things. For one patient, it may sound like victory. For another, it may sound like hope from across the room. For someone just starting treatment, with months of chemo, radiation, surgery, scans, side effects, and uncertainty ahead, that same bell may feel like a beautiful sound coming from a country they have not reached yet. For a caregiver, it may bring tears they were too busy to cry during treatment. For the nurses, PAs, NPs, doctors, pharmacists, and staff who hear that bell again and again, I imagine it carries more than one emotion. Joy, of course, relief, pride, maybe also memory. Because they know what it cost to get there, and they know not every patient gets that moment. Some patients ring the bell, some choose not to. Some leave treatment quietly. Some do not finish treatment because the road turns toward palliative care or hospice. That truth deserves tenderness, not silence. Cancer has many endings to many chapters, and not every meaningful life moment comes with applause in the hallway. So when we speak of graduation day, I want to hold the whole room in view. The ones who rang, the ones who didn't, the ones just beginning, the ones watching, the ones caring, and the ones whose courage led them down a different road. For months, perhaps years, we had lived beneath the watchful eyes of others, doctors, nurses, and an entire constellation of people whose hands and knowledge helped guide us through a frightening landscape. Someone was always there. Someone was always checking, listening, asking how we felt, and adjusting the plan. Then suddenly, they weren't. Not because they stopped caring. Not because they abandoned us. Not because we had done anything wrong. Simply because we had reached the place they had been working so hard to help us reach. Home. The strange thing about cancer treatment is that we spend months learning how to be patients. Then, almost overnight, we are expected to remember how to be something else. Survivors, whatever that means. The next morning arrives with no appointment, no infusion chair, no waiting room, no blood draw, no familiar nurse waving from down the hall. Only silence. And in that silence, many of us discover something unexpected. Cancer may be finished with its treatment schedule, but cancer is not finished with our thoughts. The questions remain. What was that ache? Should I be worried? How do I stop thinking about the next scan? Why am I grateful and frightened at the same time? Why does everyone else seem ready to move on when I am still trying to understand what happened? These are not always medical questions. They are human questions. And medicine, for all its brilliance, is not always designed to answer them. That is where you enter the story, dear Mentorship. Not wearing a white coat, not carrying a stethoscope, not holding an iPhone, You arrive carrying something different. Experience. You are the person who sits down across from a newly graduated patient and says, "I remember." Not, "I know exactly how you feel." No one can know that. But, "I remember feeling something like that." My dear mentorship, those words are often enough. Because isolation loses much of its power when someone else recognizes it. Isolation loses its energy when someone says, "I am here to listen." The mentor does not fix the problem, eliminate uncertainty, or promise a happy life ending. The mentor simply shines a small light farther down the road, bright enough for the next traveler to see where the path continues. Particularly for those of us living with rare cancers such as PSCC, that light matters. I started off without a light, stumbling in the dark toward 2 penile surgeries. Rare diseases create rare forms of loneliness. Sometimes we leave an appointment carrying questions that seem impossible to explain to friends, family, or co-workers. Sometimes we wonder whether another person has ever stood close to where we are standing. Sometimes rare diseases cause people in our circle to ghost us, quietly leaning back into their own dark spaces. Damn cancer, when will you stop taking from us? Mentors answer a question without speaking a word. A sigh or a confirming sound can be enough. A mentor's very existence says, "Yes, you are right about that," while you feel an arm on your shoulder, even when they are on their phone. Perhaps that is the true purpose of mentorship. Not advice, not expertise, not instruction. Presence. One human being telling another, "You are not the first person to walk this road, and you do not have to walk the next mile alone." I learned there is gratitude in that exchange. The mentee is grateful for the hand extended backward, as I was when I finally received a mentor. Months later, when I became a mentor, I learned there is grace in reaching back. And I saw that survivorship is not only what we survive, but what we offer after. And somewhere between those 2 acts of gratitude, healing continues long after treatment has ended. I am wondering if healing ever stops. So this letter is for the newly graduated patient, staring at an unexpectedly quiet calendar. It is for the patient who rang the bell, the patient who did not, the patient just beginning, and the patient whose road has turned toward comfort, dignity, and time measured differently. It is for our caregivers, who smiled in the hallway and cried in the car. It is for our nurses, PAs, NPs, doctors, fellows, pharmacists, medical techs, and schedulers, who helped carry each of us to a milestone, knowing that every milestone has a different sound, depending on who is listening. The letter, rare because our cancers are rare, this letter is for the survivor wondering whether their experience has value. It is for every person who has ever thought, "I wish someone had told me this sooner." Because someone can. And perhaps one day, that someone will be you. With gratitude for those who walked behind and who walked ahead, I wish you well. Ty. The Penis Monologues. Rare letter number 8.